The United States has carried out massive precision strikes on 3 key nuclear facilities in Iran, obliterating them, in his words. We've seen a number of explosions over Tel Aviv and Jerusalem in the past few hours after Iran launched a missile attack. Israel says a number of areas were hit in the north and center of the country, with at least 16 casualties reported. Well, Israel says a number of areas were hit in the north and center of the country, with those casualties reported, and 30 missiles in total were managed to breach the Israeli defense shield. Sirens sounded in several regions as Israel's defensive systems operated to intercept the threat. These pictures show some of the damage from Iranian attacks. Well, we'll be hearing more on that in just a moment or two, but first let's take a listen once again to President Trump. During an address at the White House, he said future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier if Iran does not make peace.
A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier. For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. They have been killing our people, blowing off their arms, blowing off their legs with roadside bombs. That was their specialty. We lost over 1,000 people, and hundreds of thousands throughout the Middle East and around the world have died as a direct result of their hate. In particular, so many were killed by their general, Qasem Soleimani. I decided a long time ago that I would not let this happen. It will not continue. I want to thank and congratulate Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. We worked as a team like perhaps no team has ever worked before. And we've gone a long way to erasing this horrible threat to Israel. I want to thank the Israeli military for the wonderful job they've done. And most importantly, I want to congratulate the great American patriots who flew those magnificent machines tonight, and all of the United States military on an operation the likes of which the world has not seen in many, many decades. Hopefully, we will no longer need their services in this capacity. I hope that's so. I also want to congratulate the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Raisin-Kane, spectacular general, and all of the brilliant military minds involved in this attack. With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all, by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill. Most of them can be taken out in a matter of minutes. There's no military in the world that could have done what we did tonight, not even close. There has never been a military that could do what took place just a little while ago. Tomorrow, General Kane, Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth will have a press conference at 8 a.m. at the Pentagon. And I want to just thank everybody, and in particular, God. I want to just say we love you, God, and we love our great military. Protect them. God bless the Middle East. God bless Israel. And God bless America. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, as you heard there, President Trump said that 3 key sites were hit in Iran. Let's take a closer look at them. They were at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. President Trump said that Iran's facilities had been, in his words, completely obliterated. Well, Isfahan is a uranium conversion plant, whilst Natanz is an enrichment plant. And even before the US strikes, the International Atomic Energy Agency, that's the UN nuclear watchdog, said that Natanz had sustained severe damage. But the main site hit this morning was Fordow. The uranium enrichment site is situated about 60 miles, that's about 100 kilometers south of the Iranian capital, Tehran. It is located in a mountainous region. It's thought to consist of two main tunnels that house centrifuges used to enrich uranium, as well as a network of smaller tunnels. Reaching this underground installation, which is at least 60 meters below ground, required more powerful bunker-busting bombs, which only the US has. Its official name is the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator, and the only planes that could carry such bombs are B-2 stealth bombers, which were indeed involved today. Senior Department of Defense officials confirmed that the bomb was used in the attacks, with two being deployed for each of the three nuclear targets. Well, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke after the strikes, praising President Trump for the decision and for the US support for Israel.
Congratulations, President Trump. Your bold decision to target Iran's nuclear facilities with the awesome and righteous might of the United States will change history. In Operation Rising Lion, Israel has done truly amazing things. But in tonight's action against Iran's nuclear facilities, America has been truly unsurpassed. It has done what no other country on earth could do. History will record that President Trump acted to deny the world's most dangerous regime the world's most dangerous weapons. His leadership today has created a pivot of history that can help lead the Middle East and beyond to a future of prosperity and peace. President Trump and I often say, peace through strength. First comes strength, then comes peace. And tonight, President Trump and the United States acted with a lot of strength. President Trump, I thank you. The people of Israel thank you. The forces of civilization thank you. God bless America. God bless Israel. And may God bless our unshakable alliance, our unbreakable faith.
A delighted Benjamin Netanyahu there, but even despite the American bombing this morning, the war absolutely goes on. A little earlier, Israel confirmed that 30 Iranian missiles were fired towards Israel. We heard the sirens here, we heard the alert. We went down to our bunker very quickly for some 40 minutes, and you can see here the live pictures in Haifa in northern Israel. That's pretty close to the Lebanese border. That was one of the areas that saw direct hits of those Iranian missiles. The Israelis are now saying that there were 10 direct impacts of the Iranian missiles that got through, and at least 16 people are injured. It is reported that one of these sirens failed in Haifa to warn of an interceptor going up, and so that could potentially have explained some of the injuries up there. Here in Tel Aviv as well, there were missiles which we heard around our hotel. Our hotel shook a little bit, and we heard the whistle of the interceptions. This is the skyline now live here in Tel Aviv as Israelis wake up and try to comprehend the scale of what is happening. Let us turn now to Trita Parsi, who is Executive Vice President at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, a think tank that advocates for a US foreign policy centered on diplomacy and military restraint. Trita Parsi, I would venture that diplomacy and military restraint is quite the opposite of what we have seen this morning.
Certainly, this was an illegal attack, a violation of Article 56 of the Additional Protocol to the Geneva Convention, and done in a manner that really makes a mockery of diplomacy, because there was still an opportunity to be able to strike a deal that would be far more effective than this. We still don't know exactly what damage has been done, but it does appear extremely unlikely that the Iranian nuclear program has truly been eliminated. And that results most likely that there will be continued bombing and not this kind of a one and done that Trump seems to have envisioned.
And yet, diplomacy only really works when both sides are willing to sit down and talk. And what we've had from Iran over the last few days has been not only a complete pushback, not only saying that they're unwilling to negotiate under bombardment, but saying that Europe's proposals were completely unworkable, refusing to roll back enrichment to 0%. So do you actually believe that there was any chance of getting the Iranians to engage in meaningful diplomacy?
Certainly. I mean, I would remind your viewers that, of course, the United Kingdom kept on saying that that Ukraine should not have to negotiate while it was being bombarded. So it seems to be the very same logic that the Iranians have applied here. I nevertheless think that it was a mistake of them, not that they didn't talk to the Europeans, because I don't think they're that relevant in this equation any longer, but rather that they refused to engage directly with the United States. I think it would have been much better if they had done so. But when it comes to the requirement of zero enrichment, which incidentally the Europeans had abandoned more than 15 years ago and were trying to convince the United States to drop as well, because they recognized correctly that as long as that was the negotiating position or the red line of the West, there would never be a deal. And the only time we've had a deal is when the West actually accepted that there would be restricted enrichment taking place in Iran under strict inspections rather than pushing for zero. When Trump started this negotiation, he had not adopted the zero enrichment position. That's the Israeli red line. His red line was no weaponization. That's part of the reason why the negotiations actually were successful at first. Halfway through, he shifted the goalpost and adopted the Israeli red line of zero enrichment. And it's since then that we have seen this trajectory towards military confrontation, which was highly predictable.
Trita, we've just had a comment from Rafael Grossi, head of the UN nuclear watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency, who has said that there will be an emergency meeting of the agency on Monday. What is your fear now in terms of how Iran might try to utilize what remains of its nuclear know-how? Because, of course, facilities can be destroyed, know-how can't, and whether they will actually try to rush to weaponize if they were not already doing so?
Well, there's no evidence that they were doing so. I think it's important to remind the viewers of that, and the IAEA has testified to that. I do fear, however, that that is a very likely outcome, that this is the natural reaction that they would have, as almost any other country would have, to this type of an attack. Of course, there's other things that they may do in the medium, which is, for instance, walking out of the NPT altogether, which would mean that the IAEA would no longer have any access to what is happening inside of Iran's nuclear program, because they would be kicking out all of the inspectors. All of these things were predictable, and part of the reason why the IAEA, as well as nuclear experts and non-proliferation experts throughout, have warned about this only looking as a success in the short term, but in the long term actually being a failure. This is exactly what happened when the Israelis bombed the Iraqi nuclear reactor, Osirak, in 1981. At first, it looked as a great success, but later on, we learned that as a result of this, Saddam Hussein quadrupled his nuclear budget. And had he not invaded Kuwait in August 1991, had he only waited 6 months or so, he would have actually had a nuclear weapon. And the world had no idea what was going on in the Iraqi nuclear program at the time. And
yet, critics of Iran would say, well, look, enrichment at 60%, which is where Iran was at, in enriching about 400 kilograms of uranium to 60%, there is no other need for that. There is no need in terms of energy, in terms of medical use for enrichment at that level, apart from trying to make a nuclear warhead. And get that coupled with the extremely secretive behavior of the Iranian regime with regards to nuclear weapons inspections over the years means that, you know, Iran has maybe not brought today on itself, but I mean there was absolutely no trust remaining between Western governments and certainly the Israeli government and Iran.
Well, the Israeli government is not part of these arrangements because it is a nuclear weapons state that is not part of the NPT. So that's not really a factor here. It is absolutely true that there is no civilian use of 60% enriched uranium, and that that this was very clear that this was part of what the Iranians viewed as their leverage that they would negotiate away. Already in the very beginning of these negotiations that Trump conducted, the Iranians agreed to go down to 3.67%, which then negates almost everything else that was part of the premise of your question, because that was part of the negotiation to get rid of that. And that option still existed. The United States and Israel chose to start war instead of actually fulfilling these negotiations.
Trita Parsi, Executive Vice President at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. Thank you very much indeed for speaking to us here on BBC News. Well, let's turn to our Chief North America correspondent, Gary O'Donoghue, who is live with us from Washington. Gary, it's still early where you are, of course, but I'm sure it's been a fairly sleepless night for all of you, just as it has been for us. Just give us your sense of the enormity of what we are seeing here, that an American president who campaigned on America first and ending the eternal wars has now actually done what was the unthinkable and attacked Iran.
Yeah, and I think there is some surprise here that this has come around so quickly, particularly, Mark, after that 2-week deadline that the president issued on Thursday through his press secretary. We know that after that, of course, there was some meetings in Europe with the Iranians, and yesterday the Iranian foreign minister speaking as well. So it's possible that those public statements, along with what the Americans were hearing through the back channels, made them make up their mind pretty quickly that Iran wasn't going to, that it backed itself into a position in the same way as, in some ways, Donald Trump has backed himself into a position setting these deadlines. So that's all kind of in the mix at the moment. There is some criticism coming from Democrats in Congress, as you can imagine. I think the question will be to what extent this split in Donald Trump's base over attacking Iran and getting involved in another foreign war, as it's put, how much that will fracture further as a result of this. One thing I think is worth bearing in mind, Donald Trump, the other day said really that, ground troops, putting boots on the ground was somewhere you really didn't want to go ever. And I wonder whether he's starting to think that perhaps using these bombers at tens of thousands of feet, using these missiles fired from submarines miles and miles away, is a sort of step short of really breaking his promise or getting involved in that sense. I think that may be a pretty optimistic view, because certainly where you are, there's clearly no doubt that America is now a combatant in this conflict.
Gary, given that this is very much a unilateral American move alongside Israel, i.e. not in cooperation with America's Western partners, can we read anything into the fact that the B-2 bombers were deployed to Guam, to the US overseas territory, and which is very far away from Iran, and not, for example, to Diego Garcia, the base in the Indian Ocean that Britain still effectively runs and allows America to operate from? Can we read anything into that in terms of the Americans trying to avoid a kind of a diplomatic collision with the Brits about this?
I think that's possible, although what I would say is that Donald Trump is unlike previous US presidents. He doesn't feel he needs that kind of cover from his allies. If he's going to do something, he doesn't mind doing it alone. Much of his foreign policy is about America first, and some people say America alone. So I'm not entirely sure. I mean, clearly that would have put the British government in a pretty difficult position, and maybe it didn't want to do that. David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, was here last week, and he went off to Geneva to deliver a pretty tough message to the Iranians after having met with the National Security Council people here in Washington. America has these various options militarily, flying these B-2s, and of course they can refuel in the air. They can, be refueled in the air, so they can span the globe, quite frankly, independently. So that may well have been a factor. We'll learn, I think, in the coming days. And Mark, we're expecting in probably about 3 or 4 hours from now, a briefing from the Pentagon. The Pentagon doesn't do briefings anymore, basically, but the Defense Secretary, the Secretary of Defense, and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs are going to stand up at 8 o'clock local time and they will be asked a lot of questions by journalists in that room, and I'm sure that will be among them. And also, you know, what kind, you know, with what confidence can they at this stage say what they've achieved? Because obviously this was done at night time. They've got to wait for the satellite imagery to come in. They have other means as well of trying to bottom out what they've actually achieved. But the president, you know, described it as a sort of total success within minutes of it happening. And I think people will feel that the jury is a little bit out on that right now until there's some more concrete evidence.